What happens when a judge orders a proud veteran to remove his Medal of Honor in court? The town's outrage sparks a showdown nobody saw coming. The late afternoon sun hung low over Brighthaven, Virginia, casting a golden haze across the weathered asphalt of Juniper Hollow Road. The air carried the sweet tang of blooming dogwoods, mingling with the faint exhaust of cars rumbling along Route 17. At the edge of this small town, where the pavement gave way to gravel and memories clung like dust, stood the Brighthaven County Courthouse. Its brick facade, chipped and faded, bore the weight of decades, its columns streaked with moss. The clock tower above hadn't ticked since a lightning strike in '94, frozen at 3:17, as if time itself had given up on the place. Inside, the air was thick with the musty scent of old paper and the low hum of fluorescent lights, flickering like the last breaths of a dying star. Hiram Jensen, 78 years old and lean as a fence post, stepped through the courthouse doors, his polished but worn loafers scuffing the linoleum. His hands, gnarled from years of labor and scarred by shrapnel from a war most in this town had only read about, trembled slightly as he adjusted his faded navy blazer. Pinned to his chest was a small, star-shaped medal, its blue ribbon frayed at the edges, but vibrant against the muted fabric. The Medal of Honor, awarded for a day in 1968 at Dong Ha, Vietnam, a day Hiram carried in his bones, but rarely spoke of. His gray eyes, sharp despite the years, scanned the hallway, taking in the peeling paint and the faded portraits of long-dead judges. He leaned on a cane, not because he needed it every step, but because some days the weight of memory was heavier than his wounds. Hiram wasn't here for himself. He'd come for Darnell Quincy, a lanky 20-year-old from down the street, caught in a petty theft charge over a 129 soda at the Quick Stop on Persimmon Avenue. A misunderstanding, nothing more. Darnell had paid for gas and thought the soda was covered. But the store clerk, a sour-faced man named Vernon Platt, had called the cops, and now Darnell faced a judge. Hiram had known Darnell's family for decades, ever since he'd moved to Cloverfield Lane after his wife, Bernice, passed. Loretta Quincy, Darnell's mother, had begged Hiram to speak as a character witness. "You're respected, Mr. Jensen," she'd said, her voice cracking over the phone. "They'll listen to you." Hiram doubted that, but he couldn't say no to Loretta's tear-streaked face. Inside Courtroom B, the air was stale, the wooden benches creaking under a sparse crowd. A bored reporter from the Brighthaven Gazette, a young woman named Tessa Langston with a notepad and a skeptical frown, sat in the back. Two retirees, Otis Caldwell and his wife, Myrna, whispered to each other, their faces etched with the curiosity of folks with too much time. Loretta sat in the front row, clutching a crumpled tissue, her eyes red but hopeful. At the defense table, Darnell slouched in a borrowed suit, the cuffs too short, his hands fidgeting. The public defender, Sylvia Brentwood, a woman in her 30s with dark circles under her eyes, shuffled papers, barely glancing at her client. Across the aisle, the prosecutor, Curtis Hargrove, leaned back in his chair, his tailored suit and slick grin screaming small-town ambition. At the bench loomed Judge Marlon Treadway, a man in his late 50s with a face like a storm cloud, his slicked-back hair gleaming under the lights. Treadway was known for his efficiency and his temper. Whispers around town said he was gunning for a state Supreme Court seat, and he ran his courtroom like a general preparing for war. Hiram took his seat, his cane resting against his knee, the medal a quiet weight on his chest. He felt the eyes of the room, Loretta's, hopeful, Otis and Myrna's, curious, Curtis's, dismissive. The hearing began with a drone of legal formalities, each word sinking into the heavy air like stones in a pond. Curtis presented his case with a practiced drawl, clicking through grainy security footage from the Quick Stop. The video showed Darnell grabbing a soda, laughing with a friend, and walking out, the bottle in hand. "Theft is theft," Curtis said, smirking at the jury. "No matter how small." Sylvia stood, her voice thin but earnest. Your Honor, Darnell Quincy is a first-time offender. He's a hard-working kid, employed at Ramsey's tire shop, supporting his family. This was a mistake, not a crime. Her words felt rehearsed, but they lacked fire. Hiram watched Darnell's shoulders slump, the boy's hope fading with every syllable. Then Sylvia called Hiram to the stand. He rose slowly, his cane tapping the floor, each step deliberate. The room seemed to shrink as he walked, the weight of his past trailing him like a shadow. He settled into the witness chair, his back straight despite the ache in his spine. The clerk, a mousy woman named Doreen Phelps, adjusted her glasses. "State your name for the record." "Hiram Jensen," he said, his voice low but steady, like a river carving stone. It carried the gravel of age, but also the strength of a man who'd faced worse than a courtroom. Sylvia approached, her hands clasped nervously. "Mr. Jensen, how long have you known Darnell Quincy?" Hiram's lips twitched, a faint smile breaking through. "Since he was a sprout, about knee-high to a grasshopper. Used to chase fireflies in my yard with his sister Shayla. Good kid, always was. Helped his mama Loretta after her husband passed. Fixed her porch steps last summer, didn't ask for a dime." He paused, his eyes meeting Loretta's. "That soda? Just a mix-up. Darnell ain't the stealin' kind." The retirees nodded, and Tessa scribbled in her notepad, her pen moving like a heartbeat. Sylvia pressed on. "Can you speak to his character, Mr. Jensen?" "He's honest," Hiram said. "Shoveled my driveway last winter, no questions asked. Took his little sister to school when Loretta was working double shifts. Boy's got a heart bigger than his mistakes." Curtis stood, adjusting his tie with a flourish. "Objection, Your Honor. The witness is offering opinion, not evidence. We're not here for bedtime stories." Treadway's eyes narrowed, his gavel hovering. "Sustained. Mr. Jensen, keep it factual." Hiram nodded, his face unreadable, but inside a flicker of irritation stirred. He'd seen men like Curtis before, cocky, quick to judge, blind to the weight of a life lived. Sylvia, flustered, asked a few more questions, but her voice faltered under Treadway's glare. Then it was Curtis's turn. The prosecutor paced, his shoes clicking on the floor. "Mr. Jensen, you're a neighbor, not a detective. Were you at the Quick Stop on June 3rd at 7:14 p.m.? "No, sir," Hiram said. "Was home, watering my zinnias." Curtis smirked. "So you can't confirm Darnell's actions that night?" "I know the boy," Hiram said, his voice firm. "That's enough." "Not in court, it ain't." Curtis's eyes flicked to the medal. "And what's that on your chest? Some kind of war trinket?" Hiram's hand brushed the ribbon, his fingers steady despite the tremor in his heart. "Medal of Honor, sir. Earned it in '68. A murmur rippled through the room. Tessa's pen froze. Loretta's tissue crumpled tighter. Curtis raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Cute. But it don't make you a witness to theft. No further questions." As Hiram stepped down, his cane louder than he meant it to be, he felt Treadway's stare boring into him. The judge's lips twitched, a sneer barely hidden. The hearing dragged on, Sylvia's closing argument a weak plea for leniency. But before Treadway could rule, he leaned forward, his voice slicing through the room like a bayonet. "Mr. Jensen," Treadway said, his tone cold as winter. "That medal, is it real?" Hiram stopped, halfway to his seat. "Yes, sir. Dong Ha, 1968. Earned it savin' my men." Treadway's eyes glinted with something dark. Disdain, maybe, or envy. "This is a court of law, not a VFW hall. That kind of display is inappropriate. Take it off." The room went still. Loretta gasped, her tissue falling to the floor. Otis and Myrna exchanged stunned looks. Sylvia opened her mouth, then closed it. Hiram's chest tightened, not from pain but from a wound deeper than shrapnel. He'd faced ambushes, mortars, the screams of dying friends. But this was his home, his country, spitting on the one thing he'd carried through it all. "With respect, Your Honor." Hiram said, his voice steady but laced with iron. "I wear this for the men who didn't come back." "Ain't about me." Treadway's face flushed, his gavel trembling in his hand. "I don't care who it's for. This ain't a parade. Remove it, or I'll have you escorted out." Sylvia stood, her voice shaking. "Your Honor, Mr. Jensen's attire isn't relevant." "Sit down, Miss Brentwood," Treadway snapped. Curtis leaned back, his grin wider than ever. Hiram's hands shook now, not from age, but from a quiet rage. He felt every eye in the room. Loretta's tears, Tessa's shock, the retiree's whispers. He'd survived jungles and bullets, but this moment stripped him bare. Slowly he unpinned the medal, his fingers lingering on the star, the ribbon soft as a memory. He tucked it into his pocket, its weight heavier than ever. The room was silent, save for the creak of his cane as he sat. Treadway delivered his ruling. 6 months probation for Darnell, plus a $200 fine. The gavel fell like a guillotine. As the crowd dispersed, Loretta rushed to Hiram, her voice breaking. "Mr. Jensen, I'm so sorry. That wasn't right." "What he did." Hiram patted her arm, his face a mask of calm. "Don't fret, Loretta. Focus on Darnell." Outside, the sun dipped low, painting the dogwoods in shades of fire. Hiram stood on the courthouse steps, the medal a cold lump in his pocket. Jermaine Carver, Darnell's friend, leaned against a lamppost, his hoodie pulled low. "That judge was out of line, Mr. Jensen. You gonna let him slide?" Hiram's eyes traced the horizon, where the last light clung to the trees. "Ain't about me, son," he said, but his voice carried a tremor of resolve. "Never was." As he walked home, the gravel crunching under his cane, Hiram felt the fire in his chest grow, a quiet, unyielding flame. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew he'd carried heavier burdens before. And he wasn't done carrying this one. The morning sun crept over Brighthaven, Virginia, painting the rooftops of Cloverfield Lane in soft hues of amber and rose. The air carried the crisp bite of early summer, laced with the scent of fresh-cut grass and the faint hum of a lawnmower down the street. Hiram Jensen sat at his kitchen table, a chipped ceramic mug of black coffee cooling in his hands. The room was small, its walls lined with faded wallpaper, a relic of the life he'd built with his late wife, Bernice. A single bulb hung overhead, casting a stark glow on the table where the Medal of Honor lay, its blue ribbon coiled like a sleeping snake. Hiram's gray eyes, etched with the weight of 78 years, lingered on the star-shaped pendant. It gleamed, defiant, a silent testament to a day in 1968 he'd spent decades burying under the quiet rhythms of small-town life. The Brighthaven Gazette had hit the stands at dawn, its front page screaming, "Veteran shamed in court over Medal of Honor." Tessa Langston's article painted Hiram as a stoic hero, Judge Marlon Treadway as a cold bureaucrat. By mid-morning, the paper was sold out at the corner store on Persimmon Avenue, and local Facebook groups buzzed with indignation. "Disgraceful," posted a woman named Darlene Vickers. "Treadway ought to be ashamed," wrote another, a mechanic named Floyd Hensley. Hiram hadn't seen the article, he didn't own a smartphone, and his old radio played only AM stations, crackling with gospel and weather reports. But the weight of the town's chatter pressed against his small bungalow, as if the walls themselves whispered the news. The phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the morning stillness. Hiram set his mug down, his fingers stiff from old wounds, and answered. It was Loretta Quincy, her voice thick with worry and righteous anger. "Mr. Jensen, you seen the Gazette? Whole town's talking about what that judge did to you. Ain't right, not one bit." Hiram leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking under his lean frame. "Ain't looking to stir a hornet's nest, Loretta. Just wanted to help Darnell." "But they're listening now," she pressed, her words tumbling fast. "Folks are mad. You gotta do something, Mr. Jensen. For you, for all the vets." Hiram's gaze drifted to the mantel, where a faded photo showed him in his army uniform, young and unscarred, standing with his platoon in Vietnam. Next to it, Bernice smiled in a sundress, her eyes bright at a county fair decades ago. "I'll think on it," he said, his voice low, like a man measuring the cost of a fight he hadn't chosen. After hanging up, Hiram felt the walls closing in. He needed air, space to think. He tucked the medal into his blazer pocket, its weight a quiet anchor, and grabbed his cane. The streets of Brighthaven were waking up as he stepped onto Cloverfield Lane, the asphalt patched and uneven. Kids rode bikes, their laughter sharp against the drone of cicadas. At the corner of Tanglewood Drive, the Brighthaven Community Center stood, a low brick building with a sagging roof and a sign advertising bingo night. Hiram hadn't been there in months, too busy tending his zinnias or helping Loretta with odd jobs. But today, the pull of familiar faces, old soldiers, men and women who understood the cost of service, drew him like a beacon. As he crossed the parking lot, a group of teenagers on skateboards swerved past, their wheels screeching. One, a lanky kid named Rodney Phelps with a mop of red hair, smirked. "Yo, old-timer, where's your fancy medal today? Judge take it for good?" His friends laughed, their voices sharp as broken glass. Hiram's grip tightened on his cane, but he kept walking. "Mind your manners, son," he said, his tone calm but edged with steel. "World don't owe you a free pass for being rude." Rodney snorted, kicking his board and speeding off, but the jab lingered, a pinprick in Hiram's pride. Inside the community center, the air smelled of burnt coffee and lemon polish, the kind of scent that clung to every small-town gathering place. Folding tables were scattered across the room, where a dozen seniors played cards or swapped stories. Orville Tatum, a retired Marine with a barrel chest and a face like weathered leather, sat near the window, nursing a cup of tea. At 80, Orville still carried himself like he could storm a beach. He spotted Hiram and waved him over. "Heard about the courthouse," Orville said, his voice a low rumble. "That judge got no call treating you like that. You holding up?" Hiram eased into a chair, his cane resting against the table. "I'm still standing," he said, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Takes more than a gavel to knock me down." Orville chuckled, but his eyes were serious. "Town's in an uproar. Vets groups talking about a letter to the county board, calling for Treadway to answer for it. You in?" Hiram's fingers brushed the metal in his pocket, its edges sharp against his calluses. He'd never been one for grand gestures, petitions, protests. All that noise felt like shouting into a void. "I don't know, Orville," he said. "I didn't wear that medal for applause. Ain't sure I want to fight over it." Orville leaned forward, his voice dropping. "It ain't just about you, Hiram. It's about every one of us who served. You let this slide, it's like letting them spit on all our graves." The words hit like a punch. Hiram's mind flickered to Dong Ha, the jungle's heat, the crack of gunfire, the weight of a wounded man on his back. He pushed the memory down, but it clung, stubborn as ever. Before he could answer, Felicia Dorsey, the center's director, approached. Her warm smile didn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes, the kind that came from juggling budgets and egos. "Mr. Jensen, there's a reporter outside, Tessa Langston from the Gazette. Wants to talk to you? I can tell her to beat it if you want." Hiram sighed, rubbing his temple. "No, I'll see her. Might as well set the record straight." Outside, the parking lot shimmered with heat, the asphalt radiating warmth like a skillet. Tessa waited by a picnic table, her curly hair tied back, a notebook in one hand and a pen in the other. She was young, maybe 25, but her eyes held a hunger for truth that Hiram respected. "Mr. Jensen," she said, standing as he approached. "I wrote the piece about you. I hope I did you justice. Can I ask you a few things?" Hiram nodded, leaning on his cane. "Go ahead, miss, but I ain't much for headlines." Tessa's questions came gently, like rain on parched soil. Why did he wear the medal? What did it mean to him? How did he feel when Treadway ordered it removed? Hiram answered slowly, each word measured. "I wear it for my brothers," he said, his voice thick with memory. "Men who didn't get to grow old. That judge, he didn't see that. He didn't. Thought it was just a shiny bauble." Tessa scribbled, her pen flying. "People are angry, Mr. Jensen. They're calling it a disgrace. Do you think the judge was wrong?" Hiram's jaw tightened. "Wrong's a small word for it. Man sits up there, wielding power like a club, but he don't know sacrifice, don't know what it costs to carry something like this." His hand patted his pocket, the medal's weight grounding him. Before Tessa could ask more, a black SUV roared into the lot, kicking up gravel. Out stepped Curtis Hargrove, the prosecutor, his tailored suit crisp despite the heat. Beside him was Deputy Lamar Whitlock, his sheriff's badge glinting, his hand resting on his belt like a warning. Curtis's smug grin was gone, replaced by a tight scowl. He marched toward Hiram, his steps sharp and purposeful. "Jensen," Curtis said, his voice clipped as a lawyer's brief, "you're causing a mess with this media stunt. Judge Treadway's taken heat, and it's on you." Hiram's eyes narrowed, his voice low but cutting. "Stunt? I was trying to help a kid. Your judge turned it into a circus." Whitlock stepped closer, his boots crunching gravel. "Watch yourself, old man. We're here to keep things civil. You keep pushing this, it'll get ugly." Tessa's pen froze, her eyes wide. Orville, who'd followed Hiram outside, crossed his arms, his voice a growl. "You threatening a man who saved lives while you were still in diapers, deputy?" Curtis raised a hand, his smile thin as a blade. "Nobody's threatening anybody. Just advising Mr. Jensen to let this die. For his own sake." The air crackled with tension. Across the lot, Rodney and his skateboard crew had circled back, their phones out, recording. Hiram felt the weight of it all, the stares, the accusations, the medal in his pocket like a stone. Part of him wanted to walk away, to retreat to his zinnias and his quiet life. But the fire in his chest, kindled on the courthouse steps, burned hotter now. He'd faced worse than a smug lawyer and a badge-heavy deputy. He'd carried men through hell. This was just another fight. "I ain't stirring nothin'," Hiram said, his voice steady as granite. "But I ain't backing down either. You tell your judge that." Curtis's jaw twitched, his eyes darting to Tessa's notebook. "You'll regret this, Jensen." He and Whitlock turned, the SUV's tires spitting gravel as they peeled out. Tessa exhaled, her voice shaky. "Mr. Jensen, this is bigger than Brighthaven now. People need to hear your story." Hiram shook his head, his cane tapping the ground. "I ain't after fame, miss. Just what's right." That evening, Hiram sat on his porch, the medal in his hand, its star catching the last light of day. Crickets chirped, and a dog barked down the street. He thought of Dong Ha, of the men he'd lost, of the promises he'd made to carry their memory. Treadway's words echoed, inappropriate, and Curtis's threat lingered like smoke. Across the street, Jermaine Carver leaned against a lamppost, watching. "You gonna fight this, Mr. Jensen?" he called, his voice half hopeful, half challenging. Hiram didn't answer. He ran his thumb over the medal's edges, his heart heavy, but unbowed. The stars were emerging over Brighthaven, and with them, a resolve as steady as the man who'd earned it. The Brighthaven County Fairgrounds on Saffron Meadow Road pulsed with life under a cloudless Virginia sky, the air thick with the scents of kettle corn, grilled hot dogs, and sun-warmed grass. It was Saturday morning, and the fair was in full swing. Children darted between booths, clutching balloons, while vendors hawked quilts and homemade jams. A Ferris wheel spun lazily, its creak mingling with the twang of a bluegrass band strumming Shenandoah on a makeshift stage. Hiram Jensen, 78 and weathered as the oak trees lining the field, walked through the crowd, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the packed dirt. His flannel shirt, faded but clean, hung loosely on his lean frame, and the Medal of Honor was pinned to his chest once more, its blue ribbon catching the sunlight like a beacon. The star-shaped pendant felt heavier today, not from its metal, but from the weight of the past week. The courthouse, the stairs, the whispers that followed him like shadows. Hiram had come to judge the Veterans Association booth contest, a tradition he'd helped start a decade ago to honor local heroes and raise funds for wounded soldiers. The fairgrounds were a far cry from the jungles of Dong Ha, but the sense of duty was the same. He moved slowly, his back stiff from old shrapnel wounds, his gray eyes scanning the crowd. Faces turned toward him, some with curiosity, others with a quiet reverence. By now, Brighthaven was ablaze with talk of the courthouse incident. Tessa Langston's articles in the Brighthaven Gazette had fanned the flames, and grainy cell phone videos, posted online by a pack of skateboarders, had spread the story beyond Virginia. Hiram hadn't watched the videos or read the headlines. He didn't need to. The weight of the medal in his pocket all week had been reminder enough. At the veterans' booth, a modest setup draped in American flags and old military photos, Orville Tatum greeted him with a firm handshake. The retired Marine's broad shoulders strained his denim jacket, and his eyes held a glint of mischief. "Good to see you, Hiram," Orville said, his voice a low rumble. "We got a surprise cooked up for you today." Hiram frowned, his cane planted firmly in the dirt. "I told you, Orville, I ain't here for a show. Just want to do right by the vets." Orville's grin widened. "Too late, brother. Folks want to stand with you. You'll see." Before Hiram could argue, a ripple of excitement stirred near the stage. The crowd parted, revealing Judge Marlon Treadway, his tailored suit crisp despite the heat, his aviator sunglasses reflecting the midday glare. He moved through the fairgoers like a politician on a mission, shaking hands and flashing a practiced smile. Curtis Hargrove, the prosecutor, trailed him, handing out flyers for Treadway's state Supreme Court campaign. Deputy Lamar Whitlock, badge gleaming, hovered nearby, his eyes scanning the crowd like a hawk. Hiram's stomach tightened, a knot of anger and unease. He hadn't expected to see them here, not today, not in this place of celebration. Tessa Langston appeared at Hiram's side, her camera slung around her neck, her curly hair tied back. "Mr. Jensen," she said, her voice low but urgent. "I got word Treadway's planning a speech to clear the air about the courthouse. You okay with that?" Hiram's jaw clenched, his fingers tightening on his cane. "He can talk all he wants, miss. I'm here for the booth, not him." Tessa nodded, her pen poised over her notebook. "People are watching, Mr. Jensen. This could get big." Hiram didn't respond. His eyes drifted to the veterans' booth, where a young volunteer, a woman named Keshia Brantley, arranged photos of local soldiers. One caught his eye, a black and white shot of his platoon in '68, him barely 20, grinning beside men who'd never see 21. The memory hit like a mortar round, and he pushed it down, focusing on the present. The bluegrass band wrapped up, and Treadway took the stage, tapping the microphone with a sharp ping. The crowd hushed, sensing a storm brewing. "Good people of Brighthaven," he began, his voice smooth as polished wood, but edged with defensiveness. "I'm here to celebrate our community, our shared values. But I must address a recent misunderstanding. An incident in my courtroom has been twisted by the press. My request for a certain individual to remove a decoration was about maintaining respect for the court, not disrespecting service." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Hiram stood still, his cane a lifeline, the metal burning against his chest. Orville muttered under his breath. "Slippery as a snake, that one." Keshia at the booth crossed her arms, her face tight with disapproval. Treadway pressed on, gesturing broadly. "I honor our veterans. My own father served in Korea. But rules are rules. No one, no matter their past, is above the law." The crowd's reaction was a mixed chorus. Some clapped politely, Others whispered angrily. Near a cotton candy stand, Rodney Phelps and his skateboard crew snickered, their phones out, filming. Curtis handed out more flyers, his grin smug as ever. Then a voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Judge Treadway!" It was Felicia Dorsey, the community center director, standing near the veterans' booth. Her warm demeanor was gone, replaced by a fire that matched her red blouse. "If you honor veterans, why'd you humiliate one in your courtroom? Hiram Jensen earned that medal saving lives. What did you earn up there on your bench?" The crowd turned, a collective intake of breath. Treadway's smile faltered, his sunglasses slipping down his nose. "Ma'am," he said, his voice tight. "I don't humiliate anyone. I enforce decorum." "Decorum?" Orville roared, stepping forward, his boots kicking up dust. "You told a Medal of Honor recipient to take off his medal like it was some dollar store pin. You call that respect?" Cheers erupted from the veterans' booth, spreading through the crowd. Hiram raised a hand, urging calm, but the fire in his chest blazed hotter. He hadn't asked for this fight, but it was here, raw and undeniable. Treadway's face reddened, his gavel hand twitching as if longing for control. "This is a fair, not a debate hall," he snapped. "Deputy Whitlock, remove these disruptors if they continue." Whitlock moved toward Orville, his hand on his belt, but the crowd shifted, a human wall of fairgoers blocking his path. Loretta Quincy, standing with Darnell and Jermaine Carver, shouted, "Leave Mr. Jensen alone. He's a hero, not a troublemaker." Darnell, his eyes wide, nodded, his borrowed suit wrinkled but his stance firm. Jermaine raised a fist, his voice carrying. "Yeah, back off." Treadway's composure cracked, his voice rising. "Enough! This is a family event, not a circus." Then a low rumble grew in the distance, like thunder rolling over the Blue Ridge Mountains. Heads turned as a convoy of vehicles, jeeps, pickups, and a Humvee with American Legion decals rolled into the fairgrounds, dust swirling in their wake. The crowd parted, and out stepped a dozen men and women in military attire, their faces stern but proud. Leading them was Colonel Thurman Gentry, a tall, silver-haired man in a dress uniform, his chest adorned with ribbons that told a story of decades in service. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, found Hiram's, and he nodded, a silent salute between brothers in arms. Gentry strode to the stage, his boots steady on the dirt. "Judge Treadway," he said, his voice calm but commanding, cutting through the noise like a bugle call. "I'm Colonel Thurman Gentry, U.S. Army, retired. I served with Hiram Jensen in Vietnam. I understand you ordered him to remove his Medal of Honor in your courtroom. Is that true?" Treadway froze, his sunglasses now a shield he couldn't hide behind. It was about courtroom protocol," he stammered, his voice thin. Gentry turned to the crowd, his presence filling the space. "Protocol. Let me tell you about Hiram Jensen. In 1968 at Dong Ha, he carried 3 wounded men through a burning jungle under heavy enemy fire. Shrapnel tore into his back, but he didn't stop. He saved lives that day, at a cost most of you can't imagine. That medal ain't a decoration. It's a testament to sacrifice." The crowd erupted in applause, some wiping tears. Tessa's camera flashed, capturing the moment. Rodney's crew lowered their phones, their smirks gone. Hiram stood silent, his throat tight, his eyes glistening with memories he'd buried deep. He hadn't asked for this, but Gentry's words lifted a weight he'd carried alone for too long. Gentry faced Treadway again, his voice unyielding. "You disrespected that sacrifice, Judge. Today, we're here to set it right." From the convoy, veterans unfurled a banner. "Honor our heroes. Stand with Hiram Jensen." Fairgoers cheered, their voices rising like a tide. Keshia handed out small flags, her smile fierce. Loretta sobbed, hugging Darnell. The bluegrass band struck up Sweet Virginia Breeze, and the crowd began chanting Hiram's name, a rhythm that echoed off the Ferris wheel. Treadway grabbed the microphone, his hands shaking. I misspoke in court. I meant no disrespect to Mr. Jensen or any veteran." His voice cracked, and he stumbled off the stage, Curtis scrambling after him, flyers fluttering to the ground. Whitlock backed away, his badge no match for the crowd's roar. Whispers of a county board investigation were already spreading, Treadway's ambitions unraveling like a cheap suit. Hiram raised a hand, his voice cutting through the noise. "Let him go," he said, steady as stone. "This ain't about tearing a man down. It's about remembering what matters." The veterans surrounded Hiram, some saluting, others shaking his hand. Loretta hugged him, her tears soaking his flannel. "Thank you, Mr. Jensen," she whispered. Darnell, his eyes bright, added, "You didn't have to do this for me." Germain nodded, silent but proud. Keshia approached, holding a folded flag from the booth contest. "For you, Mr. Jensen," she said, her voice soft. Hiram took it, tucking it under his arm, its weight as familiar as the metal. As the fair resumed, Hiram walked back to the booth, the crowd parting for him. Tessa snapped one last photo. Hiram, medal gleaming, cane steady, surrounded by his brothers and sisters in arms. The Ferris wheel turned, the band played on, and the sky stretched wide over Brighthaven. Hiram didn't gloat over Treadway's fall. He'd fought for something bigger, dignity, memory, the men he'd carried through fire. He pinned the medal tighter and walked on, his heart full, his steps sure.